Hello, Transformational Travel Designer course. We're back again. This is your course facilitator, Tanner Colton here. And today I'm here with my good friend, Tania, who's going to walk us through kind of her method of creating transformational journeys or personal transformations, really, for folks, just to give you guys a background of what that might look like. And she'll give some examples and walk you through some cool stuff. So maybe I'll throw it to you and let you introduce yourself, and we'll go from there.
Absolutely. Thanks, Tanner. So maybe just to give you a little bit of where I'm coming from, the transformational retreats that I lead right now, which are grounded in the experience that we have when we travel to different countries and different scenarios, if you will, originates in the background that I have in change management and leadership development and coaching. So I'm really coming from that place of psychology and also the arc of how things change.
Yeah.
And that has informed first in my business life, the creation of workshops and transformation strategies for organizations. And then I sort of thought, what happens if I marry this with where I seek the most transformation, which is travel, which is what I love to do. Yeah. So I just wanted to paint that as the origin of my expression of transformational travel. And
just so people know too, what's the name of your company? Just so people, if they want to look you up.
Yeah, so it's called Adventum Journeys. Nice. So Advivum Journeys. And Adventum is a Latin toast that means to life.
Wow, so nice.
So that's sort of, the base behind what we're doing.
Cool.
Great. And so as I understand it, everybody is looking for a little taste of how do we go about designing something in our travel that would elicit intentionally personal transformation.
Yeah, for sure.
Because I think as we've been talking and as we know, transformation will kind of happen whether you intend it or not. It's a experiential journey. But this is if you are intending a personal transformation, how can we guide ourselves or guide our clients through that kind of experience?
Right.
So I thought that I would take us through my process and just share that way, and hopefully it resonates with some of the folks out there.
Right. And then just to lay some groundwork too, I think for me, how I thought about how the designers might use or take from what you're going to present, this is your method, and you've done this for a long time and with different kinds of folks, and it applies to like people that are looking for what you offer, right? So what I want people to think about is like generally kind of the ideas that you're going to present and how you go through, not like that your method will work exactly for everybody's clientele or their market or whatever, but as we listen or as we talk, just be thinking about how can I pull some things from this to use for the folks that I'm going to be working with. So, but I do think that the process and the method you talk about, this arc, I just think it's really, really cool. So I'm excited to go through it.
That's great. And I love that clarification. And I'm, if we do get to a question and answer part, happy to help people adapt, what I'm talking about to maybe their specific situation. That I always find that lots of fun. So absolutely. So the first thing that I want to also emphasize is that everything that I am going to explain is all work that I am doing in the preparatory design phase before I'm even announcing a trip. Yeah. Okay, so this is all pre-work for me. This is in a design phase. And the first thing that I think of is clearly articulating what is the objective of the personal transformation that I want this trip to lift up or facilitate. And I think it's really important because here we're going for intentional personal transformation. Again, not that transformation that happens with the ahas that we bump into. Those are great. But this one is, if I am really helping lead someone, I need to be clear where that is. So examples of Objectives would be things like vision would be an objective. Someone who's curious about where am I going? You know, maybe this is a group that is at a juncture in their life, a career shift, or the place where kids are no longer at home, or at retirement, or at a significant birthday, or, you know, this is often a conversation that's happening around some kind of milestone.
Right.
So vision, where am I going? So it's an example of an objective. Another one would be the growth of self. Who am I? Right? The rediscovery. Who do I want to be in this world? How do I want to redefine my role? How do I want to redefine how I perceive myself? This also happens usually at significant transitions in our lives.
Right.
Interestingly enough, it can often happen after we feel successful. You know, yay,
yeah.
I am that. Damn, what am I going to do now?
Yeah, what's next?
You know,
yeah.
kind of thing.
Yeah, for sure. I've definitely felt that before.
Right?
Yeah.
So that's a different kind of objective. Or a third one might be built around values. You know, what does it mean to live my best life? What does that look like? You know, and that's usually a values quest. So how will I measure my life? You know, how will I evaluate if it was a good day or a good year or a good marriage or a good career or a good whatever, you know?
Yeah.
Also the question of, what do I want to be known for? What is my purpose or my why? Those are all values kinds of objectives.
Yeah.
So I would say first know what is the kind of transformation that you want to go after? What is the kind of trick, you know, that you're trying to architect there?
Yeah, and I
so
think that's, sorry, I wanted to just throw in, I think that, you know, if we're talking about transformational travel design in this course and trying to give people tools to use, this discovering of the objective is like such a big piece of it. We talk about transformation can happen intentionally or it can happen by accident or whatever, right? But whether or not the intention is there for the traveler, for us to be able to create or curate an experience or put in things for someone on their trip, it's really important for us to at least understand where someone's coming from, right? So how do I get at that? And that's something for us to each think about in our own business. How can I do something to get at that with that person, whether it's screening questions or whether it's a phone call or whether it's readings or something like that. You know, I think the important thing is to remember to get at what is the objective, and that's really important. And I like how you lay it out like that.
Yeah, and I think even when you go to do your marketing, if you've chosen to be intentional about a certain objective, then you can right away start to build that into your language, you know.
That's
not
a really
only
important point.
Experience the heights of, you know, the Scottish Highlands, but experience your own heights for your own vision. You know, that kind of thing can start to come out, and people will tap into it right away.
And is there a way, do you think that that's useful, like on different, like let's say I'm designing multiple different trips, could I focus on, okay, I want this trip to be really impactful for people who are trying to evaluate where they're going in life, and this trip is for some other, is it useful that way?
Yeah, no doubt. People will find a whole mess of things, you know, but I would say streamline and keep it super simple. Choose one, because personal transformation is very complex. And so you want to keep, you know, it's like a movie. You don't want to have too many characters and too many plot lines, and it's confusing for the audience. And this is really a case where you're the director. You have to choose, what kind of movie is this? Is it a romance? Is it a horror? Where are we going? You know, so that the audience can go, okay, I kind of get where you want to take me on this story, and I'm signing up for that.
That's awesome. That's a great way to think about it.
Yeah. So maybe to continue this movie analogy, after you've chosen your objective, which is kind of like the movie genre that you've decided to play in, you're then going to want to choose or consider what storyline. What is the storyline to get to that end point? You know, if it's a horror, and obviously then you need to scare people, there's a certain sequence of events that has to happen in order for that to be plausible.
Right.
Same thing if it's a romance, you know, there's a sequence of events that happens that has you know and fall in love with the characters and really root for them. Otherwise, it's pointless, right? Totally. So it's the same thing in when you're working towards your objective. You have to ask yourself, what is the logical storyline in order to get to this end point? Okay, and this is for people who know the hero's journey. That's a great example of a storyline, right, that gets you from a beginning to an end. And if you mixed up all of those steps, it'd be a little like, I'm not sure this quite works.
Yeah, in a previous module, we did go pretty deep into the hero's journey and Joseph Campbell and all that stuff, so everyone should be familiar with that. So I think that analogy fits perfectly with this,
Awesome, right. Yeah. So for example, if we were to take vision as our objective, so I want to offer an experience that will help people connect with or ground themselves or elevate a vision. That's our objective. Well, how are we going to do that? So here's one way. There are many ways, just like there are many paths, you know, to the end point of a movie. There are many ways, right? But one way would be to say, okay, step one, I want you to right away dream big. And then step two, now that you're dreaming big, I want you to name and predict the roadblocks that are either that you put in the way or that naturally come in the way from you achieving your dream.
Right.
And then step three, after you name the roadblocks, I want you to find your strengths and see the upside of that dream. So now you've got what might hold me back, but also what's going to allow me to achieve what I want. And then step four is push them to dream even bigger, because now they're bought in. They want that. They're aware of what might trap them. So go even further. And then step five is like, fine, commit to it, implement it, make a plan. So that's an example of, if it's done in that order, there's a certain progression. You see there's a certain momentum. It kind of experientially would make sense to you.
Right. And let me ask a question just for my own clarification. So again, we're talking about these things and you're saying this is kind of preparatory work that you're doing before you even put a trip together or start promoting a trip. So is that still true with this piece of it as well? You're thinking about this ahead of time if you're putting yourself in the traveler's shoes kind of and thinking?
Absolutely. All of this is done before I even said, hey, I've got this great idea. People come and join us, you know, it's all before.
Cool. Okay.
And for me, it's a debate which I choose first, the country or the objective. It's usually one or the other. And I try very hard to think which would map well to what.
Right.
So I'm really being intentional, because not all journeys support all objectives the same way or as easily, right? So that will be a part of everybody's thinking. If you know that you're going on a certain excursion or to a certain place, that might influence the objective, or vice versa. Just depends. So when I was doing vision, I actually started first with this awesome place that I found in England. And I fell in love with this beautiful location and the whole experience of this manor home and the little village that it contains, and the whole English landscape and the walking, and it was this experience that I wanted to reflect on and bring to my clients. And that had me identify, you know, for this feeling, this would be a great place to do vision work.
Mm.
You know, it wouldn't be a great place to do some of the other objectives. It just
Right.
wouldn't hold it as well.
Right. So that's
So
an
that's
instance
what I
where
think.
like the feeling of a place or what the destination or even the you know the manner itself could offer gave you the okay, here's the objective that this place is giving me, so I'm going to run with that kind of.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's
So
cool.
if you think, okay, I set my objective, I found the steps to the story, you know, the things that will end in the achieving that objective, and I put that up on my wall. And then I had in mind already, okay, England, Kent, this beautiful Goodnestone Manor, what, you know, how do these two play with each other? What I did is set aside my story and take a look at England and ask myself, what are the special attributes of the country, of the house, of the culture, of the music, of the food, etc., that I would want to highlight? If I would imagine that, you know, this is somebody's chance to step back into old England, what would they most want, right?
Yeah.
So I went through and I identified three things: the history of this grand 18th century manor, it's absolutely beautiful house. I identified the walking along the footpaths in England, which is totally different than anything we do in North America, right?
Okay.
Where it's it's like a scavenger hunt, you know, and you're walking through backyards and over moats and, you know, in places that you can't even see from the road. And so I identified that as an experience, and I identified these National Trust gardens that are around the house that were planted, you know, a couple of 100 years ago.
Wow.
I mean, that's just mind boggles, you know, for me.
Yeah.
So I was like, those are somehow signature experiences. So I have on the wall, these are the signature experiences. This is my objective and the story steps. And then I sit back and I say, okay, how do I marry these two together so that my experiences support the phases that I want people to go through?
So these are the steps, right? So how do I use the attributes or the characteristics of the place to fulfill each of the steps in my storyline? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So then this is when it gets really fun here in my design studio, and in fact through the whole house, because then everything becomes covered in massive flip chart paper as I, you know, start to break everything down.
So you're actually using like diagrams and stuff as like a, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I storyboard it exactly like a movie. And each one of my steps gets a separate piece of paper, you know, so I have, you know, the first step that we went through, which was dream big. And then the next one, name your roadblock. And then the next one, find your strength. And each one has its own paper. Nice. And once I have that laid out, I start to transpose the trip and all of these excursions into the right place so that it feels like the whole experience is guiding me along in what I am going to discover, right? So I think about, to use this example, well, what about this, the history of the grand home? How is that relevant to this whole experience? And what was really cool when I learned about the history of this home is that it was originally funded with special money from the king. And then, as happens in history, the family was on the wrong side of the wrong king. And so then it fell into another family. And then it fell into disrepair because that family was ousted. And then it rebirthed into a hospital at the time of the First World War. And then it rebirthed again at the time of the Second World War as a special home for women. And then it rebirthed again. So what is that telling me? That's telling me, wow, that's a lot of vision that this house has had to have.
Yeah.
And if I tell that story and I say, imagine, you know, how frequently the house had to revision who she was. It inspires people to think about, oh, I wonder if I can revision who I am, right?
Yeah.
And so it says, okay, the whole experience of the house has to happen early, because that's when we're doing the dream big vision piece.
Yeah.
Right? That's when it will lift people up into that kind of thinking naturally. Just as I tell the story, you'll be thinking about your own vision.
Right.
So that's an example. Put it at the beginning.
Right. So that piece of paper that would go at the very start, right? First day or first thing we do on the trip is this to set the tone for dreaming big, right?
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, ooh, okay, historian house. Make sure that we visit with him very early on.
Yeah.
Whereas, okay, then I take the piece, little sort of postcard, and I'm wondering, where do I put it? This is the 4-mile walk that we do on footpaths. That's kind of like a scavenger hunt that everyone does by themselves, and they're all a little bit freaked because, you know, the instructions say things like, at the mulberry bush, turn left and follow the path to the crest of the hill. And you're like, I don't know what a mulberry bush is, and I don't know what the crest of the hill is, so I don't know, you know. So where do you put that? Well, if I put that at the very beginning, I will start off by confusing people and making them maybe withdraw. So that's not a good way to start when I want them to be visioning. I said my first step was dream big and vision. So that's not the right place for it.
Right.
If I put it at the very end and it's not successful, that's not a good place to start planning and implementing from. We said the last stage was planning, implementing, committing.
Right.
So I know that it has to go somewhere where we're taking a look at, you know, either name the roadblocks or find your strengths, right?
Yeah.
So when they're doing this, they are naturally going to realize as they go on this big walk, oh yeah, I tend to very quickly just declare, I'm lost, and I give up. Oh, do you notice that? Maybe that's why you never get to the end, you know? So it might be useful in that phase of my storyline, right?
Right.
So I take that and I stick it on the big sheet that says, note your roadblocks. Okay. That's going to be useful experience for them there.
Yeah. And
then the last one I had mentioned was the gardens. You know, these National Trust gardens that, you know, some of the plantings from over a couple of centuries ago. I mean, imagine.
Wow. So
who visions 200 years from now?
Yeah.
That's incredible. And could that person have imagined that I would be standing here and be moved, and that this garden is a national trust? When the first person planted it, they didn't plant a national trust garden, you know, they didn't. So that really, learning about that and understanding the big arc, that seems like it goes really well in the dream even bigger phase, right?
Yeah.
So
think
it's
about
like,
something so far down the road, or something that's, yeah, you're right, that first person that planted that garden wasn't like 200 years from now, this is going to be, you know, but maybe they did, you know, maybe they did dream that big, and that's a cool thing to think about.
Right. And did they know their why at that time? Did they what was their sense of purpose?
Right.
And look at how, you know, the long arc of their sense of purpose went how many generations, whether they were really able to articulate where it ended up or not. So then I think, okay, the private tour with the gardener in the garden, that goes when I need people to really dream big and get them lost in the beauty of this space. And that's a nice place for me to then prompt, you know, if you were dreaming 200 years out, how big would your dream be? So then I'd say, okay, that's definitely happening over here on this part of the trip, day 4, or what, you know, wherever that is. So that just gives an example now of how I am taking these signature experiences that are of the place that I am visiting, and I am marrying them into my storyboard, which has a logic to it that brings me to the end objective that I want to achieve. So now I'm also on the same massive flip charts, plugging in the tactical things, arrivals, and, you know, all of the stuff that needs to happen to hold the group. And also some of the little features of the design of a day that I feel really work. So now this is where I'm starting to plug it in.
Right. I'm trying to envision too, before we get to the last step there. So I'm seeing kind of like it's the storyboard with things with plugged in the examples you gave are kind of like, these are the main steps, right? Like, here's the thing that's going to achieve one of my steps in my storyline to get me to my end objective. But that's not the whole trip, right? In between each of those is opportunity for other activities, whether it's, and we'll get to what those are, but this is to plug in pieces that would supplement those bigger ideas, right? Or give people a chance to reflect on those bigger things. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, there's a whole other, there are many layers that now are going to go across this storyboard. One of them is going to be the practical layer, arrivals, departures, food, right. And, you know, all that kind of thing. We have to figure that out. I actually give to my chefs the direction of, well, on this day, you know, this is the name our roadblocks day. So what food, you know, should we be serving on that day? That's not a luxurious, tranquil, you know, laid back lunch and dinner. No, this is like spicy day. This is when I'm
it's
like,
challenging food day.
Get them on fire. I need them to be like agitated. And then on Dream Big Day, well, that's the day where we choose to actually create a more formal dinner, you know, and because I want you to dream as big as this dinner food would even inspire you to. So I lay that through. I lay through the music to map all of this. If, you know, I'm in a retreat center, so I have to control the ambient noise that's going on. And then other activities that might be happening. Then because it's a group, I need to be layering on, how is this group meshing together? You know, something needs to happen for them to be willing to dream big in a group. You know, that's a vulnerable thing. So have I thought through how they are going to meet one another and immediately bond with one another? And so on and so forth. So there are probably about 12 layers that go all on the same thing. And I guess to that point, there are a few things that I find are, that I would never sort of design without. One is an understanding that ritual is really important for people. It keeps them grounded. It keeps them coming back. It feels safe. Even the second time I do something, it's like, okay, I know what this is, right? Even though I might be a little nervous about meeting the group again this morning, I know that we do this thing every morning, whatever it is, you know, and a ritual simply means something that we do in common that is orchestrated. So it could be a special way that we start in the morning with the poem or greeting each other, or, you know, the ritual of breaking bread at breakfast, or everybody share one thing about, or whatever it is, but create a ritual I think to start the day and to end the day, those bookends are important.
Yeah.
And then anywhere else that you think is important.
Right. I wanted to throw into, I think, I don't know if it's going to come before this video or after, but I am having Ike Desiree, who runs another travel company. She's going to be leading the course, people in the course, through an actual ritual that she does on her trips as an example of something that she does. And so that'll go really well, giving people an idea of here's something that you can do with people that does have that impact.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. And I think along ritual, there also, for me anyways, especially when there's personal transformation involved, having an ending that involves some kind of celebration, or some kind of graduation, or some kind of, declaration, as long, I guess, as it ends in Asian, and I don't know why I look for it that way, but right, that's important as a moment where I step into a new way of thinking or being.
Right.
Another thing in design will be the very intentional creation of community, being very deliberate about the moments of sharing, the type of sharing, and the opportunities to connect with one another. It is true that when we travel together, a lot of that seems to happen just naturally. However, if you want personal transformation to happen, it does need to go even deeper than what happens naturally. So it does need to be orchestrated. So find ways to help people connect and get over that awkwardness of introducing self to other, or being vulnerable with one another, or encouraging one another. All those things make us feel awkward at first.
Sure.
And I think designing that in is really important.
Nice. Yeah.
The other thing for personal transformation, no surprise, being very intentional around reflection. How you invite people to reflect in 3 ways. 1, personally, so journaling, solo walks, just giving them a challenge, a question challenge, slipping that into their lunch bag, whatever it is, but personal reflection, paired reflection. So sometimes we discover things differently in conversation than we do in our own thoughts. So paired reflection is very powerful. And then group reflection is also really powerful, because that's how we model and inspire one another and are inspired by one another when we see something happen in the group. So find a way to encourage reflection, especially the sharing of ahas, because those are contagious and they just kind of spark fire around everyone.
I find too that in some of the trips that we design, we put in like intentional days, whole days sometimes, and sometimes it's like an overnight where people are doing something alone, right? Like one trip we designed, we had people go out and camp out overnight by themselves in the mountains. Like, and there was a group of them, but everybody went and did that on their own, like supported obviously by our partners, but did that overnight and then came back, and then there was an intentional time of reflecting together on that experience. So I got to go off and be by myself for a day, reflect personally, come back. Now I can share my reflections with the group and learn from others too. So there's like a progression there of how that might work, which I've found does work really well.
Yes. Yes. So cool.
Yep.
And that kind of leads to the last one that that it seems kind of obvious, but that sometimes we can, when we're designing, forget, which is to design in some kind of quest, some kind of challenge, some kind of thing that's intentionally outside the comfort zone that we're going to have to push through our defenses or inhibitions, and those challenges can happen They can be physical challenges. They can, be like the one you described, going off on your own. But they can also be emotional challenges. It could be a challenge for some people if I have to share, my learnings with the group. That can be a challenge because I'm nervous about it. One of my favorite secret weapon challenges is if I have a retreat that's at least 4 days long, usually unannounced, so this will ruin it for anybody who comes on a retreat. Usually about day 3, announce mid-afternoon with no foreknowing that we're going into silence, and we are going to remain in group and remain in our activities, but in silence until after breakfast.
Wow.
And woo, you want to see a lot of reactive behavior suddenly come up, and so that's very simple. It doesn't require anything extra to happen. But it's a huge challenge for people who have been bonding for 3 days and who are now excited to be sharing their journey with one another, especially if they happen to be in the dream even bigger phase, because that's when they most want to chat. So it's an example of a challenge that you can orchestrate without having to change anything in whatever else is happening in your trip design.
Right. Yeah, those are some really great tips. And I can vouch that all of those things do make a huge difference in, if we think about your progression or your storyline, moving the traveler along that story, right? And that each one of those are good tools to use at each different phase to try to induce those different kinds of things, which is really, really great. So I guess maybe we'll do a summary really quick, and maybe I can summarize what I got from what you said, and then you can correct me and tell me where I was wrong. But so at least if I'm thinking about it from a travel design perspective, or there's some folks in the program that do like run lodges, or people that work in coaching and that kind of stuff. So trying to think about it as generally as I can. The idea here is to do a lot of this intentional planning and working through this storyline and where do I want things to go in ahead of time in preparation as I'm designing the trip. Whether I use the idea that I have as the foundation or the destination that I have, or maybe there's one big experience that I'm going to center the whole trip around, start with that, and then think about what does this do good for, or what objective does this lend itself to, whether it's a vision, self, or values. And then I can storyline from there. What do I want the pieces to be? And you gave those examples of, dream big and naming roadblocks and those kind of things. But I assume that those steps can be anything, right?
Absolutely.
Whatever fits for the experience that I'm creating.
Yeah. And
then taking all that stuff and assigning value or assigning characteristics to the things that make the destination what it is or make it unique. Where can I fit each of these experiences into my storyline so that it puts people in a mind state to achieve those things that I'm hoping that they achieve or that they hope to achieve. So that's kind of, I feel like, at least for me, how I would take it into doing my work is this process by which I can really ground the whole trip in this idea of achieving this objective or gaining this transformation that I'm hoping that the traveler does.
Yeah, absolutely. And that way you're getting the travel part of your trip, the experience of, in my case, England, countryside, etc., right, working as a co-facilitator.
Yeah.
I consider these destinations co-facilitators to the coaching and everything else that I might be injecting into this. Yeah. But this is really using travel as one of the things that leverages personal transformation.
Yeah. And I just was thinking too about if I ran like a hotel or a lodge or a bed and breakfast or something like that, this is perfect for that too, because my place that I run has unique characteristics to it, right? It has grounds and it has a community around it and it has natural features and it has culture and it has all these things, I can design a whole experience. When people step into my lodge or my retreat, they're going to go through this process as they move around, or maybe they don't even move around. Maybe it's just interacting with different things. But I think the idea fits no matter what you're doing, which is really cool.
Absolutely. It would be so cool to be checking into a lodge and not only get, you know, here is everything that you can experience on our property and in the immediate grounds, you know, but, you know, we've curated this in a special way because we know that maybe most of the people that come here are people who are transitioning, you know, early retirers or something. 55 plus is showing up. Great, I know that you're thinking about who to be next. We suggest you do it in this order. Like, how fun would that be? So then there's something extra in what I've you know, been invited to experience on a property that other properties may not offer me.
Right, totally. Well, was there anything last you wanted to put in summary-wise, or last ideas to leave before we sign off here?
Gosh, I feel like I really should now just drop in this huge gem, and I don't know that I have one.
No, I think this whole thing has been a real gem, and I at least even for me, like talking to you over the last few weeks and months, I just think it's so valuable and it's so cool and it has so many uses. So I hope that everybody can take something from it. Yeah, and I think
I hope so too.
I think we're going to try to schedule a live Q&A for you to come and pop in for a little bit with the group the week that we release this video. So that'll be available for people to ask you specific questions too. So that'll be really fun.
Oh, I love that. That would be awesome. I absolutely adore this work. So talking about it is the next best thing.
Right. Well, thank you so much. I really, really appreciate your time. And hopefully we can do another one of these again in the future.
Sounds great, Tanner. Thanks so much.
Okay, thank you.
Take care.